Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Lounge. I'm your host, Randy Likas, and today we're going to talk about a topic that I'm personally passionate about and one that we here at Nectar are helping organizations solve. And what is that topic? It's moving beyond MQLs and building an account-based buying group or opportunity-based revenue engine. Everyone's talking about ABM and ABX, but what we're going to talk about today goes beyond that. It's a go-to-market transformation that aligns marketing, sales, product, and success to an opportunity-based buying group motion. And I'm thrilled to have Joel Jacob join me as my guest today. Joel's the Director of Marketing Operations at Reltio and one of the key team members that helped Reltio make their transformation. Joel, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here, Andy.
Joel, I had the pleasure to talk with Eric across your CRO a few weeks ago, and he shared the journey with me. But I'm excited to talk with you because you were really involved, I think, on the systems and the operations side of things and some of the challenges that y'all had going through the operational level. But before we get into that, I usually like to open up these episodes and have you maybe just walk us through your career background, your journey, and what your current role is at Reltio today.
Yeah. So I'll try to make it brief. I started way back in 2008, so dating myself a little bit, but started off with an emerging technology. At that point in time, it was called Salesforce. I think we've all heard of it now. So I happened to get a good break. There was a company, they just got Salesforce and they didn't know what to do with it. So they had some freshers, we were just, first job, they said, go figure out this platform. And one thing leads to another. I started off with Salesforce. Then came the marketing automation side of the house. They said, hey, there's this marketing platform. Can you go figure that out? So I said, why not? So I started off Salesforce, marketing automation. Marketing automation back in the day was Eloqua, for those of us that remember. And it's been a journey since then. I've been working very closely in the marketing automation. So I think when I started, there was no marketing operations per se, or it was the other side of operations, not marketing operations as we define today, but totally different way of thinking of operations. So started off in automation operations, was implementing platforms on the marketing side of the house. And I think throughout my career, I've had the privilege, and I can say this, that I've never implemented anything in a silo, which is just for marketing. There's always the combined vision of like, hey, this is marketing, might lead it, but how does it impact downstream team members such as sales or BDRs who are going to use it? So always had that perspective, and having started from Salesforce, it gave me a good background into how the sales process, BDR process might work and tweak implementations to achieve a good outcome for both teams. So now I've been 5 years here, joined as a senior manager of marketing operations. I had to sort of rebuild our tech stack, so brought in our tech stack as we have it today, rationalizing our investments through the COVID era, ramping up after that, and then came our shift to ABX using the same tech stack. So,
yep. Well, Joel, I want to just start out. I think a lot of companies are doing some kind of an ABM or ABX motion today. What Reltio, I think, has done, though, is much more than that, right? You're doing account-based for sure, but you were one of the early pioneers and adopters of orienting the team around this buying group or opportunity-based marketing motion. Can you talk a little bit about what you all have done and are currently doing that's maybe different than how a lot of other companies are thinking about ABM or ABX?
Yeah. And one thing that stands out is, I've heard ABM, ABX for quite a number of years. I've done it in my previous companies. But always that when you say ABM or ABX, what most people think is it's a campaign or it's a process that sits within marketing. What we did at Reltio, why it's radically different, is that it's not just a process that sits within marketing. It is a transformation of our entire go-to-market process. So now, internally, we don't even call it ABX anymore because we just call it the process. Because at the end of the day, it is exactly how all of marketing, all of BDRs, and all of sales work together. So I think that was also a risk. I'm sure Eric might have mentioned it. When we said everybody is going all in, and it's not just a campaign or a process we want to do within marketing. So I would say that is the fundamental shift.
And for those who may not have seen the episode that I had done with Eric, can you talk a little bit about why the transformation? What was it that you were seeing in the business prior, and what forced you guys to say, we've got to do something a little bit different?
Oh, yeah. My favorite part of our journey, right? So just a background on Reltio. We are a B2B SaaS company. We bring in data from different sources and unify it for operational use cases across enterprise clients. So what's key here is the enterprise clients that we have and our average deal size and our average sales cycle, right? That's about 9 months. And it's a pretty high number, our average deal size. So basically, it is not something that someone would just sign up on a credit card and add it. I mean, just purchase our platform. It goes through, levels of approval at our customers' end. So I think what we found out is that what the model that we had with the MQLs, it's a pretty standard model that everyone has. You would start with basically your leads, people who engage with you. You would have a scoring mechanism. You would score it. You would call it an MQL. You would give it to the BDRs to follow up. If the BDRs have a positive conversation, they take that MQL, convert it to an opportunity, and they send it over to sales. What we did find out was that there was a lot of single-threaded opportunities that were being closed out. But if you look at investments on the front end, marketing and BDRs had invested a lot of time in bringing that opportunity to where it was, but there was also a heavy lift from our sales team to do the research. They know that the one person is not going to buy, so they got to go figure out who else is involved in the decision. So there was a lot of effort, right, on both ends. We just found the process to be inefficient. And we also saw our conversion rates was pretty low, like it was about 1% from MQLs to close to one revenue.
Yeah.
Which meant the process in itself was 99% ineffective, right? If you use that numbers and, our revenue targets are growing and we've been growing at 18 to 20% year on year. So our numbers are going up, our targets are going up, and the amount of MQLs we had to create was just incredible, right?
Yep.
And that's when we took a step back and we said, we have to do something fundamentally different. We know what the data is telling us. We have a 1% conversion rate. We see that there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of time involved in the process, even after it gets into pipeline. That is what the data was telling us. Then the customers were telling us, looking at the customer journey, we knew it is not just one person who's doing it. There are multiple people involved in a buying cycle. So we just put two and two together. We said, okay, I think we got to see how the customer is buying our platform and what are we doing from a process. We don't want to fit the customer journey into a process, that we defined.
Yep.
Rather, we want the process to fit how the customer is buying. Because at the end of the day, we are not solving for us. Usually that's where we get into. We build a process that we are comfortable with, we know how it works, but we are not really solving for the customer. So for us, it was seeing how the customer is buying our platform and then adjusting our process to that. It was around the same time we were talking to Terry and Amy at Forrester, and they had brought up this concept of an opportunity-based funnel, which we thought was very interesting, and we had a couple of sessions with them. And that's when the trifecta almost, like we have data, we can see our customers, and then we had Forrester who was telling us about this new approach, and we just put everything together and we said, I think this is what we need to go and do. And we had a leadership meeting where we had Eric and the leaders from marketing and different teams who all got the bigger picture. I would say that was one of the biggest success that we have. We had a very tight executive alignment.
Yep.
So that when it came time at my level, across operations, we have marketing ops, we have sales ops, we have other teams involved. So when it came to us, we already had the go ahead from the executive team to go and do this.
Yeah, so there's a few things you mentioned there. One is the buying process, right? It's not a linear process, and we have to adapt to how they buy, not to how we sell, right? I think that's a key thing. The second thing is the inefficiency of an individual lead or MQL-based system. I think deep down, you ask any marketer, you shoot the truth sermon, and you say, like, how do you feel about MQLs? I think deep down, everybody knows they're not happy with it. They know there's a ton of inefficiency and waste, right? And I think a lot of people are definitely looking for a better way of doing things. Certainly, you go to any of one of the industry conferences, or you hear Terry and Amy speak, or you hear people like you or Eric or Paul Walter, or all the early adopters who have made this motion. Like, people are really leaning into it. There's a lot of interest in it yet. And it's because I think they understand that what we're doing today is really flawed. Yet I think mainstream adoption, if you will, has been slower, right? And I think the reason for that is it's hard. It's not an easy transformation. It does require a transformation and an organizational shift in terms of how we align our teams, shared metrics that are aimed at shared outcomes, right? And you guys have, as I said, we're very early adopter, pioneer. You've won awards for your program. You've spoken at industry conferences, and you're one of the North Stars that I think people aspire to or look to when they think about making the change. So I'd love to dig in a little bit in terms of like when you were going through it, what were the biggest challenges in specific from a system standpoint? You said earlier that we had the executive alignment. So that for a lot of companies, I think that's the hard part. You guys had that. But as you went through the process, and by the way, you did it in a really short amount of time, right? I think from beginning to end, it was something like 60 days. So that's what makes you different from a lot of the early adopters. But I'd just love to hear the operational challenges that you face in making the transformation.
Yeah, I mean, 60 days. So you can tell the challenges we faced. I think that was the biggest challenge when our CMO told us, yeah, so can you do this? And we said, yeah, we can do it. And he said, okay, 60 days. So before the new year. So he told us in December, and our financial year starts in Feb. So he's like, okay, before the new financial year, if we can do it, we can do it. And we were like, okay, we'll do it. And why that was such a big driving factor was because we just saw the inefficiencies in the MQL world. Now, what were some of the challenges? You know, if I think about it, like time was the biggest one. And the second one was probably coming up with the joint process or a funnel redefinition with sales ops, right? Again, thinking about the scope of change. So we know the amount of time we have. So what are the things we want to go change? What are the things we cannot do in that time frame? I think one of the things quickly we kind of agreed upon so there was like weekly meeting. I think we almost met twice a week between operations, marketing, and sales. And we just stopped calling ourselves marketing and sales operations at that point. We were just operations because we all were going to the same goal. So we're like, what needs to change? So we got the concept. We workshopped what definitions would mean. And then we gave ownership, right? Like we said, okay, the first part of the funnel, marketing, you would own it. Mid-funnel, we'll have BDRs and sales ops. And then the latter part of the funnel, we'll have sales ops kind of own that piece. So we broke it up into buckets. And we said, okay, let everyone go build their solution. And then we'll again meet as a team to tie those solutions together. So that's kind of what we did. And one of the decisions that we made very quickly was we're not going to get any more new technology. Because if we get, first of all buying a new technology itself takes a month, and then implementing and getting it to work. Yeah. Definitely. So that was definitely out of the question. So we said, how can we re-architect what we have? The good news was we had almost all the right pieces. We had to make some adjustments in Salesforce. We had a great Salesforce developer on our team who made that happen, Sean and Norman. So just a shout out to them. But they did the magic in Salesforce. We did the magic in architecting our MarTech and working alongside BDRs to make sure their process, because they don't have an off day, right? The BDRs are calling, they're emailing every single day. They don't have an off day. So that's the other challenge. We don't have any downtime. It's not like a system maintenance where you can give a notice and say, hey, the CRM and the MarTech is going to be off on this day. No, there's no downtime.
No.
And it was literally overnight we flipped the switch and we were like, we don't as far as we have tested everything, this process works, but we've never put it in real life. So the first few days were definitely, we were just fingers crossed this process works. So.
How do I describe it? Like detractors involved in the operations side of things? Now, again, you guys had the mandate from executives that this is what we're doing, but what were some of the common objections that you heard during this time?
Yeah. And it's not a single person or a single team, but I would say it's the mindset that was the biggest detractor. And that's because everyone has had some experience with ABM, ABX in their past. And either that's been positive or negative. But I would say it was just the preconceived notions that people had about ABM. I think that's what were the biggest one. They had a definition of ABM, which is probably not how we're defining it. So clarifying what they expected from what we're trying to do, I think that was one aspect. Again, I mentioned a lot of the times in the past, ABX has been a campaign. So they're like, okay, so you're going to do this campaign. How many leads am I going to get?
Right.
And we're like, no, that's not what you're going to get.
Yep.
So redefining and setting the stage about what it can deliver, managing expectations. So at as I mentioned before, the executive leadership, we were aligned. But the day-to-day operators, like the sales teams, the BDRs, they're the receivers of the output of the funnel. So what does it mean in their life? How does it change things for them? For AEs, I mean, you speak to anyone and you would know you're the head of sales. Quota and what I can close in the quarter is what's most important. Everything else is noise, right? So how can we align this process to achieve the same outcome as they're on, right? So that was the work we had to do. We had a lot of refresher sessions internally, especially for our core teams, which is BDRs and sales and marketing. So
going from running a campaign and hopefully get so many MQLs and hopefully a certain percentage of MQLs turn into an ops, that's the traditional process of doing it. And there's different handoffs at different points, and different companies have adopted, set it up in terms of what is it that marketing then now delivers to the SDR or the BDR to work. And there's like early stage zero opportunity containers where we pass things up. What does that look like? So compared to the old world of things, what does it look like today for Reltio when a BDR gets in? I don't want to say you guys use opportunity containers, but how does that look in your systems today?
Yeah, no, you're right to use the word. They get an opportunity, right? And that is one of the biggest differences, because previously we were not giving them opportunities, we were giving them a person, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at your funnel, you would see different metrics from the top of the funnel, which is just your, you could say website visits or form submits, all the way down to closed one when it's an opportunity. So there are different things involved in that whole process. We've moved away from that, and in our new ABX funnel, it starts with an opportunity and it ends with an opportunity. So it's more cleaner in terms of reporting, tracking, just the simplicity of the process versus the old way. If you've used Salesforce for any, I mean, again, depends on your implementation of Salesforce, but for most parts, we have leads and contacts, and they don't work very well. In Salesforce, you always have to do two sort of reports, or you do some joint. It's just complex at the heart of it. So cutting out all that complexity and making it simple to use, I think that's one of the transitions we made. The other part is we can use opportunity-based segments in our marketing. So basically what that means is, depending on if the opportunity of the account is in a certain stage in our funnel, we can have specific ads go to that account. We do that using 6sense, where we have the intent, we have the stages, and we are also able to connect using 6sense to all our ad platforms.
Yep.
And we have segments that sync daily with our ad platform. So basically, what we're saying is we are pointing the marketing engine or the power of marketing on the same accounts that BDRs and sales want to go after, right? And that's where we unlock the value, where it's a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of punch.
Yeah.
So when we target marketing at those accounts and the BDRs are calling into those accounts with intent, because they also get the intent signals, they get better connect rates, they get more meetings, the more email connections they're able to get, versus just cold calling and they're like, I don't know who Reltio is.
Yeah. So are there those early stage opportunities that are delivered, like when are those exactly set up? Are they set up like,
yeah, so basically we set up stage 0, which is like cold opportunities. There's nothing, it's just an opportunity container.
Yep.
Now just say we want to sell to Pepsi. If the account is created, we go to the account and just create a dummy opportunity. There are no people in it, there's no data, there's nothing. Once it's created in that stage 0, it will feed one of our marketing segments for the right advertising campaign or some other campaign we have against that segment. So it'll get triggered automatically. Now all of this is automated in the back end. As soon as they respond or view the ad, there's a way we collect those signals, we move it to the next stage. the basic idea is, from cold to warm. So make sure now they know Reltio. Maybe they do some third-party research. We try to trap those intent signals wherever possible. And then if they engage with all the intent, we also want to make sure they come to our first-party sites or webinars or things like that, and we know who they are. So we try to de-anonymize who's doing the research. Yep. So the first part is, hey, let's just generate awareness and interest at that account, and then let's try to pinpoint who is doing that and try to build the buying team. So that is the whole journey. If I might just summarize it, you have a cold account, generate interest, make sure people are engaging. Based on engagement, try to go figure out who the buying team is.
Yeah, I think one of the huge advantages to doing that is if you think about the legacy way of doing things, we're spending all these marketing dollars across different channels and before the opportunity is created, which whether you want to use attribution or marketing influence or whatever it might be, that becomes a challenge because you've got these data silos that are across. But by moving to this model, you're actually solving that because you're able to connect the investments to the activities that the sales are doing. And so I would imagine it makes attribution, influence, however you want to, whatever metric you use, much easier. Am I correct there?
Yeah. I mean, if you talk to sales, they'll say marketing touches everything we sell because they see it in the data, right? Yeah. We're targeting the same number of accounts that they're going after. So that's a win-win. The other side of it, we hear this. We fought the attribution wars quite a bit. And we have scars to prove it. But thankfully, we don't fight those wars anymore internally, even if it's between partners, our alliances, our sales, BDRs, marketing. In an old MQL world, you get comped on how it is sourced. So there's always this battle going on. So that process is very, I would say, selfish because it's solving for someone at the company's comp, which I do understand is important because even I'm comped on that. But we're not necessarily solving it for the customer, right? They're just like, hey, marketing is reaching out, BDRs are reaching out because everyone's trying to get a piece of the pie. Yeah. Which just makes things very awkward and weird. I think we solve that with this approach because we know it's going to take multiple people, and for each person, it's going to take multiple touches. So we're not pretending like there's only one thing that's going to move this into opportunity. Now with this approach and architecture, we can see all the different touch points across different people in each account. That just shows how our surround sound is working.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is, as that opportunity starts moving, right, you've probably done all the work to know historically on our close one deals, here's the personas that we typically need to have in order for a deal to win. So now you can see off your active opportunities who's missing and what marketing can then do to go try to work with sales to go deliver those missing personas on those opportunities as well.
Yeah. And that goes actually even up the funnel. Like when we start moving accounts down the funnel, it is not just is anyone engaging with us, it's actually is our key personas engaging with us. Yeah. So we know who we sell to, we know those titles, and we want those titles in the room or on the opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
so then what's the criteria that y'all use from once a BDR gets something to when they pass it over to sales? In this world, how does it move from one to the next?
Yeah, great question. So we do two things. One is just the people who are involved. So we ask that there are at least 3 buying team members. We've had this debate a little bit like, hey, if a VP comes and says, I'm really ready to buy it, but I don't have anything, should we move it? Right? Very interesting question.
Yeah.
But we looked at the data, and even when they always say that, if there is no buy-in from other team members, that project never usually goes forward. So I think we've taken a line where you definitely need to have 3 people in the buying team. It doesn't matter what the other side is telling. So that is on who's involved in the opportunity. The other part is obviously a qualification mechanism like BANT or Gantt. You can pick what you like. But making sure there's a project, I think what we're trying to solve for is not just a problem, but we want to make sure there's a project that they have identified and there's budget, there's some sort of allocation, and there's been some sort of thought process. Sometimes we do get early in the process, but we don't move it into pipeline. Our teams, our BDRs and AEs, they work together to define what that is. And once we have that definition in terms of a project and the right people, that's when it's in our pipe.
Yeah. The other thing I think, which this also lends itself to, is better collaboration between the BDRs and the AEs, right? Because they're working together now on these early stage opportunities. And then as probably the opportunity is evolving, perhaps the BDRs are then saying, well, who else can we go deliver on this opportunity, right? Is that kind of how the model works?
Yes. Yeah. So the BDRs, when they start engaging with the opportunity, they see the people who have come to us. Now, we know this, that every time the people who come to us need not be the buyers. I think in the MQL world, you would make that connection. Hey, you raised your hand, you're going to buy it from me, right? But we know that's not how the journey works. Usually, there are people who are doing the research, and then there are executives, depends again on which platform and where. But at least for our technology and our platform, we have executives involved in the deal. So we know that the executives are not going to come to our website, fill out a form, and chat with us.
Exactly.
They have their team who's going to do that. So our job at the Reltio side is to talk to people who are engaging and understand what's driving it, who are the executives who are working on the project or responsible for that initiative. And we are in the data space, so you don't implement it, again, our platform in a silo. That's part of an ongoing project. And usually when we see those signs, it tells us, okay, this is a viable pipeline, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like everyone's time is valuable, our BDRs, our AEs. We don't want them chasing something that's not viable. So that just goes to the efficiencies that we have unlocked in the process.
You know, there's a lot of companies, when they pass something on, they think of just looking at top of funnel. And at Nectar, what we do is we help people think about, well, you can actually pipe in a lot of your historical opportunities, maybe opportunities from the past where you've had your buying committees, people who've been involved, and pipe those into these early stage opportunities. So when you're seeing smoke at the top and you want to get 3 engaged people, let's call the people who are engaged at the top, but let's go call the people that were involved last time. Now, a lot of companies have trouble with that because they don't have good historical data, right? Now, Reltio is a data unification company. It probably was an easier solve for you all, right? That's what we help others with. My question is, if you didn't have a platform like Reltio, how would you go about leveraging that historical data, or how important is the historical data as part of this model that you've moved to?
Yeah, as you said, the good news for us is we sell what's called traditionally it's called an MDM platform. It's gone a little above and beyond it. It's more real time, so everything happens in milliseconds. So the good news for us is we're able to bring all the data about what's happening in our accounts into our own platform and build that account-centric view that goes across different systems. So we are able to do that internally. And for folks who don't have Reltio, I would say most of that data would usually exist in your CRM. And that's where having a good operations team or a tech stack comes into play, because it just goes to say, like, if your data is in silos, you're going to have a hard time implementing this approach and getting success out of it. If you have duplicates, right? One thing we run into very commonly is accounts. Anyone who's worked with account hierarchy will tell you what a mess that is. And in this account-centric journey, the account hierarchy becomes very important. So I would say yes. I don't know if there's if you don't have good data, I don't know what to say, but it all starts with having good practices, like at least our Salesforce data, our marketing data, they were all connected. So we made the shift in 2023, but we had 6 Sense right from 2021. And we were still operating in an MQL world, 21 to 23. So in that time frame, we had the ability to just look at our data and see where the gaps are. The other thing that helped us is we were able to feed all our opportunity data, closed won, closed lost, into 6 Sense and build that predictive model for us, which kind of helped the process and helped define the right signals, right? Like when does an account surge into purchase or decision, to use 6 Sense terminology. So I think that's where having a good technology, having a good operations team plays a big role. Those who understand the importance of data, like one of the reasons we were able to move in 60 days is because our data was good enough. Like it was
Yeah.
set. We just needed to re-architect how it flows, but the data itself was good. And that was years of work before we did the 60 days. I think 60 days is what gets everyone's attention, but there was a lot of work we did.
Yeah.
Even without just having the ABM picture, but these are just table stakes now. You need to have good data. And with AI, now we are in an age of AI, so there is no AI without good data. You can have AI without good data, but I don't know if that's
Not
good
good
AI.
results. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a little about the tech stack. So as you mentioned, you guys had a pretty good tech stack before the transformation, but what do you consider to be the must-have tools as part of the stack in order to operate in this motion?
Yeah. I want to be vendor agnostic. I'm not tied to any specific vendor.
Yeah, you have to
But
mention vendors, just more capabilities.
yeah, yeah. So having a good ABM platform is, I think, the category, like 6sense or demand base. For sure, to get a predictive model and get intent, because that kind of feeds our top of the funnel. We would use something like, obviously, Marketo or HubSpot to collect all the marketing activities. Something like Lean Data to connect leads to accounts. Now, this is a very key piece, right? Because in your MQL world, you had a lot of leads that come in. Different companies have different policies. Some of them convert to accounts and contacts, some of them don't. But it's very important to collect all the information that happens in the account to get a comprehensive account overview or picture, right? So that's where Lean Data kind of helps us. We use the Lean Data matching and routing in our workflows, and then obviously everything happens in Salesforce as a CRM. But you can implement that sort of technology in a CRM of your choice. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question about propensity models or being able to predict sort of future pipeline, maybe a quarter or two out there where maybe we haven't even gotten a meeting yet, but we can see probably now where we may based on what we're seeing. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting what you said. Like, yeah, you see some things 2 quarters out, but you don't see any activity. That might be a red flag to me. Yeah, only because it depends how strong your providers are. But I think what we say is if people want to buy something, they start researching, not directly on your website. I think we all know that. They go to third party, they want to get an unbiased view, which is the way you should be doing it. But at the end of the day, after they do their research, if they're not coming on your website, then that is probably, or engaging with you in some shape or form, that's probably a red flag in our definition. But the other part of the predictive model, again, comes back to what we were just saying a little while ago. It's about your data. How you have captured your closed won or closed lost data in your CRM. Like for us, we had to train 6sense. Thankfully, we had a lot of good closed won, closed lost data. But I could see, like, if I go a couple of years back, early days of any company, you may not have that good data. The data process is a little more fluid. Data hygiene is a little more fluid because you're small startup, you're trying to move fast. So we could see like some of our opportunity data going years back was not useful to us just because it didn't have any data about who was involved. We just know it was open and it was closed, okay?
Right.
So I really have to emphasize, even if you're not doing ABM or ABX, but having a good data hygiene is really going to help you in a long way. Yeah.
Yeah. So a minute ago, you mentioned AI. And of course, we can't have a podcast without talking about AI. I'm just curious what you've been seeing. And if you were to predict maybe the next 12 to 18 months, I think there's going to be a lot of agentic agents and platforms that are going to probably have a lot of hope and a lot of promise, but because we don't have good data, aren't going to give us the results. But what gets you excited about AI and what opportunities do you see AI can play to help marketers?
Yeah, so I'll add a disclaimer. If implemented correctly, that's a disclaimer that I'll add. But I would say unlocking the efficiencies that we have, for sure, right? And I feel like that's a double-edged sword, right? I'm in operations. We all work with finance teams. The main thing they ask is do more with less. And that's probably why it's a double-edged sword. Because as AIs first of all, let's just be honest here. AIs are going to get smarter than they're going to get really smart. I've seen some capabilities that they're doing now, and I just cannot imagine what they'll be doing 5 years down the line. Yeah, I think it's almost like this is an inflection point in everyone's career, but I think we still need to train AI. We'll still need to build business context and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. And this is what someone once said to me: if you don't disrupt your own career, someone's going to disrupt it for you. So
Yep.
I think we are reaching that point of disruption in all aspects. I don't think anyone is immune to it. But nowadays you have AI who can just take a bunch of people from, say, Clay or one of those platforms, LinkedIn Sales Nav, send a couple of emails, and then get a meeting, right?
Yeah.
And even the other day I saw an AI that actually, it's an AI VC. It can fund your startup.
Really?
You should go check it out. Yeah, it's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
those are the leaps and bounds we're going. So I don't feel like anything is even immune to AI. The people who operate it will obviously have an advantage. And I think learning how to operate AI to drive better outcomes for everyone, I think that's kind of where we are. So in marketing, we use it quite a bit to unlock efficiencies. We use it with our BDR teams to make them, BDRs they're very important. So we don't want them just, if you talk about a BDR back in the day, they had to spend hours researching, going to this side, that side. I mean, you really don't need to do any of that now. You can write a prompt and you can get all
Like
that.
this conversation is absolutely, yeah. This conversation is flying by. I can't believe we're running short on time. It's been great. I have two questions I want to ask, and then I want to ask you a couple what we call our lightning round questions, which is a little bit more about you personally. So, first question is the payoff. So you did this big transformation. What did it do? What improvements have you seen?
Oh, yeah. That's why I'm still here talking to you from Reltio. I have a job. Just kidding. But what we have seen is the quality, basically our pipeline stickiness, as we call it, improve drastically. The other one is velocity, right? Deals are moving from pipeline to close to one really fast. And usually we have 9 months, which means we don't see a lot of in-year, like we open it in-year and we close it in-year. We don't see a lot of that numbers, but recently I've heard that number has gone up quite a bit based on data from our sales team. So those are the top two metrics that we are seeing in terms of ABX. Yeah.
And then the last question I have is, and it kind of goes up to what we talked about very early in the conversation, which is a lot of people are really leaning into this and they're showing a lot of interest and they love to hear the stories that companies like you share, but it's a hard transformation to make. So what advice would you give other people in operations to maybe go back to their teams? And everyone's being asked to do more, right? And everybody's trying to do more, but they're showing almost diminishing returns right now. And it sounds like this is a way to do things better, right? What advice might you give to help move the inertia of a new motion?
Yeah. I think the first one is start with data, right? Data is not political. Like, we don't want to take sides. And what we don't want to do is appear it coming from one team to another, like to say, hey, you're ineffective, I want you to make this change. That's not what we're going after, right? So trying to set the stage with data on that, like, hey, as a process or overall, like, this is probably not working. And if we were to project it for the next couple of years, what does it mean for us? What does it mean in terms of investments we need to make in the different go-to-market teams? So I would say start with the data. And the second one is for the operations people who are involved, because I'm more closer to that, is you have a good handle on what exactly is the operations. In smaller companies, it's easy because you may not have that many process. In bigger companies, that could be more complicated, but I would say knowing exactly what's going to happen when someone comes in to how it becomes an opportunity and gets passed on to sales, having a very good definition and understanding, and making sure the process, like for us, the process was working, like we didn't have any issues. It was just inefficient, right? So I think starting from that is good, because if you're trying to band-aid a process that is technically broken, then you're going to run into more issues.
So let's transition to the lightning round. And again, it's a little bit more on the personal side of things. What's the favorite part of your job?
Favorite part of the job is actually just bringing together, orchestrating ABX across marketing and BDRs. That is something I've not experienced in a long time, but just to see the outcome of all of us working together and to hear that how different teams are being successful, how marketing is being successful, how BDRs are being successful, and eventually our AEs and overall our top line growth. So
What about the flip side of that question? What's the least favorite part, or what's really hard about your job?
when things don't work. And that's two things, right? We always have to diagnose if it's a technical issue or is it a process culture issue. And then coming up with that, I mean, thankfully, for the most part, I'm dealing with technical issues. We do have cultural issues, but that's easier to fix. But sometimes you run into just technical stuff.
Yeah. The last question I have for you is, if you had to go through the process again over when you're making this transformation, what would you have done differently?
What would I have? I think spending more time explaining the outcomes. I think that is one thing we have learned is we did maybe 2 or 3 sessions, but that was clearly not enough. I think we also did it in a time frame when it was as I said, the end of our one of the years. So it was the last quarter of the year. So a lot of the AEs were focused more on completing their year than having been here. So maybe selecting a different time frame. But outside of that, I wouldn't change too much.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been a fantastic episode. I really appreciate you dropping your knowledge, wisdom, and experience on this topic. I know our audience is going to love it as well. So I won't see you this year at Forrester, but we do see each other at conferences, so I look forward to the next time we connect.
Sounds good, Randy. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks so much, Joel. Have a good weekend, okay?
All right.
All right.
You too. Bye-bye.